Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Tony Fratto, managing partner of Hamilton Place Strategies. Tony's also former deputy assistant to the president and deputy press secretary to President George W. Bush. Tony, it is great to see you as always. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Thank you. Great to be back on Trade Talks.
All right. Yeah, it is fun. I feel like it's like our, every 6-month therapy session here. Let's talk about, some higher level DC policy issues that are really going to frame a big part going into 2022. Let's start with the pandemic and where we are right now. Certainly, there's a number of policies, whether it's mandates, it just varies across the board here.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, and I think you're right to start there because it impacts everything. It impacts, some of the cultural fights we have, certainly the political fights, and also where the economy goes going forward is going to be highly dependent. We saw that very recently with the, with the seeing the Omicron virus coming, and you could track the market day by day based on how people feel about that variant. Is it, we heard it's spreading fast and the market sells off. Then we hear maybe it's not so virulent, and the market comes back, and we find out that the third booster shots are probably effective. So that's impacting everything, and so we're keeping a close eye on that. The politics of mandates are incredibly disruptive. I'm pro mandate. I want to see everybody getting vaccinated, but I understand how challenging that is in a lot of parts of the country, and we're going to see that. We're going to see members, people who are running for office next year, probably paying a political price for what I think is doing the right thing in putting mandates in, and certainly has damaged the feelings about President Biden, his insistence on mandates. But it's very clear that there's a large segment of the population that does not like mandates, and it has become political. And you're going to see candidates running on that issue. Some are running already on that issue.
Right. Well, and we'll get to the midterm elections in just a moment here. But it's interesting, in financial media reporting, we're not hearing as much about the debt ceiling as I thought that we might have, whether we do get something through, whether we are paying only certain parts of our debt that's owed, or we're pushing it down the road completely. I'm surprised to hear that narrative is really not in the market.
It's not. I mean, I think this week was a good week for the debt ceiling. We haven't had many good weeks for the debt ceiling in the 20 plus years I've been dealing with it. This was one of those weeks in that I think Leader McConnell made it clear that he was going to have to step up and help with a mechanism to make sure that the debt ceiling gets raised. It's one of these really strange issues. It has no impact on the actual debt. It's just a mechanism to help authorize Treasury to borrow, to pay for Treasuries, to pay for Congress's appropriations decisions. So it's not even Treasury's decision, but he's allowed a mechanism to go through that's going to allow the debt ceiling to be raised by a single vote in the Senate, a simple majority, so avoiding a filibuster. I think that's really important. We'll see how that plays out over the next couple of days. But I think the market has always had this view that the debt ceiling is going to get solved, one way or another. And so it hasn't engendered a whole lot of volatility in a few years now, because it just feels like, as an issue, it's Lucy in the football, and that, she's always going to pull the football away at the end. And, it's someone who's been deeply involved in this for many years. You don't want to be there the time that Lucy leaves the ball there for Charlie Brown to kick, because it will be bad. So I thought that was a good potentially, hopefully a good solution this week, that we get past this. But remember, we're not solving anything for good. We're not even solving it for the long term. We're just solving it to get through the next election. And that means that if, I know we're going to get into the midterms, but if Republicans happen to take control, those members are going to be the ones who are going to have to supply the vote to raise the debt ceiling again. And so it's one of these bizarre political issues that shouldn't be, but it is. And hopefully that we took some air out of that balloon this week for market participants.
Yeah,
if there was, as you said, like they're not, like they didn't believe something was going to happen. So, but at least we I think hopefully fixed it for
right
now.
Or maybe the market is just better at digesting headlines at this point. I mean, who knows?
Might be, yeah, they might.
let's talk about China relations. And of course, every administration handles its diplomacy different from administration to administration. Certainly, they're taking more of a diplomatic tack this time around. But, in addition to the politics of it, of course, the market is susceptible because of, we're a globally connected planet. Supply chain has been, the big conversation over the past 6 months. So really, what are we hinging on when it comes to China relations and being able to move forward?
It's incredibly challenging. I mean, this is, we'll probably say this every time we talk about China, that the U.S.-China relationship is the single most important economic relationship on the planet today and probably for the next 50 years. So these decisions are really, really important, and they're putting U.S. corporations in a difficult situation. Supply chain is one. Some cases, not even supply chain. It's companies that are doing business in China. They have business on the ground. If you're Disney World, if you're Disney, you've got not one now, but two theme parks in China, one in Hong Kong and one in Shanghai. You have GM selling more cars in China than they do in the United States. They build them there and sell them there. So these are inextricable relationships that you can't just break apart because you have a diplomatic dispute. And that's where the real heat and friction of this relationship is coming in, because as Americans, we have deep concerns about decisions the Chinese leadership is making with respect to Uyghurs, with respect to freedom of the press, with respect of dissent, or even in the case of Peng Shuai, the tennis player who made it publicly known that she was sexually assaulted by a leader in the Chinese Communist Party, and she was silenced. And these things are very, very troubling for Western democracies. At the same time, the ties are so close. So we're on a razor's edge on a lot of these things. Taiwan is a hot spot, and we have to pay very, very close attention to signals there. I think the key right now, we're not going to cancel the Olympics, and we're not going to pull our athletes out of the Olympics. The Biden administration took a middle path of leading a diplomatic boycott of the Olympics. And I think this is more important than people think. A lot of people who want to say that this is some kind of, a soft glove approach. I think this is the start of what is always going to be important with bringing China around to meeting the standards that the rest of Western free market economies and democracies require of them. And that is going to be to do it in tandem with our allies. So we saw Canada and the UK, and we're going to need to see other countries joining and linking arms with the United States to have a unified front with China if we're going to have any hope of getting them to act like the responsible global economic and political and cultural country that they will be for a very long time.
Well, we could also throw cybersecurity into the mix too, right? If you're thinking about
It's-
China and what's happening with Russia, I mean, that is the administration's really focused on that.
They should be. This is. By the way, I think these are countries that are doing things that are actually not in the best interest of their own countries and their own companies. It's very hard as an investor, or if you're another country and you're looking at Chinese companies or Russian companies. It's less important with Russian companies because the Russian economy is not very big. It's got a handful of very big companies, but it's not in the same place, not nearly in the same category as China. But in both cases, they are doing harm to their own companies because every country, every investor, every counterparty, every strategic partner and customer has to think about, who am I sharing information with when I do business with a Russian company or a Chinese company? Where does that information, where does that data go? Who is it used for? And then the malevolent forces of using technology to damage interests in the American interests around the world and even in the United States through cyber attacks and those kinds of things. It's not a long-term winning strategy in either case. It may have some short-term benefits for some certain actors, but it makes the prospect of doing business with those countries and with those companies much more expensive for them. You have to think twice about doing business with with organizations and companies from those countries.
Right. And Tony, let's spend some time in the midterm elections here. And I think really what the challenge has been, it's more about who is backing whom. And we haven't really spoken about the issues or any sort of policy, which makes, as a constituent, it's really quite frustrating. And I think, the midterm elections, it's just going to be an incredibly challenging time. You've been, in this game for a number of years. Politics really isn't a pretty place. But,
Yeah.
we're not even tackling the issues, and it's more about who's associated with who, and it's disappointing.
It's very disappointing. I wish I could say, I wish I could be the optimist. I'm here, steps away from our monuments and where the halls of democracy, and I wish I could say we're going to have an enlightened election season, but it's going to be about a whole lot of other things. Starting first with just in the House races, we're doing redistricting across the country after the decennial census, and now the redistricting is starting. So the drawing of lines of congressional districts. These are battles in almost every state, but especially those states that are either picking up or losing seats, and so those are happening right now. Election commissions, legislatures are drawing those lines. They're in courts. They're going to make those are going to create decisions for who is running where. So in a lot of ways, the 2022 election has started already, because figuring out that process is really important to see who's going to have control of the House of Representatives. The issues, the Republicans have their core issues set already, and that is they're going to be talking about what they describe as overreach by Biden administration on social spending. They're going to talk about the mandates that we talked about earlier, and this sort of heavy-handed state. These things fit into each other, where the state is telling you what to do with your life and taking money from you and spending it in ways that they think are preferred ways. Those are sort of old-fashioned, classical kinds of lines between the parties. The new infusion this time around is, the likely presence, even in 2022, of inflation is still an issue. Now, I think inflation is going to come down as an issue. I think we're going to see the receding of actual inflation and probably the inflation then as an issue. But for now, it looks like the Republicans have a story to tell, which is Democrats came in, they spent a lot of money, they spent so much money that they've caused inflation, and your prices are going up everywhere, and that's a tax on you. That is a very simple message. All of us who are here debating about what the Fed did and didn't do, and supply chains and everything
It doesn't matter for the everyday American.
Doesn't matter. All they know, they've gone to the store and prices have gone up, and everyone has told them that this is true. And so that becomes a very easy message for them. And I think you're going to see them make a lot of progress on these things. I mean, look, if I had to bet today, probably see Republicans. I think all but certain Republicans are going to take back control of the House, and they've got a shot at the Senate. Now, issues, I'm not necessarily going to see enlightened issues on a lot of these races. We saw former Senator Perdue
Yes.
enter the state the race in Georgia to run against the incumbent Republican Governor Kemp, and his main issue is that he would not have certified the 2020 election in Georgia. Now, this is a state where that every single vote in that state has been counted by hand, paper ballots. There was absolutely no question there wasn't fraud that would have had any impact in that race at all. Joe Biden won the state of Georgia, and those officials certified it. But that's going to be the issue in that Republican primary, that the Trump influence on those voters, and that they're not going to want Republicans who do not believe that the 2020 race wasn't stolen. And it's very unfortunate. There's nothing enlightened about that. We know it's not true, but that's where we're going to be in a lot of these races.
Right. Well, that's why you should be encouraged to vote locally, because it really does start from the bottom up, and we're seeing the results of that. Tony, great to see you as always. Thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.